4 years ago, I made a video called 7 of the most horrifying animal attacks. It got over 1 million views, but there's a good chance many of you have never actually seen it, as it has been age restricted for 3 of those 4 years. I really tried to get YouTube to take the age restriction off, but it just didn't work. So 4 years later, I'm remaking that video with a couple of new entries added too. Though, interestingly enough, no new species have been added, because I guess these ones are just the ones that are most likely to brutally murder you. Here are 10 horrifying animal attacks. On September 23, 2014, 20-year-old Maksud Khan was visiting Delhi's National Zoological Park. Khan had become a regular visitor there. He'd lost his job as a factory worker weeks before and started telling his mother he was out looking for another job, when really he was spending all of his money on zoo tickets. The white tigers there had become his fixation. Around 1:30 that afternoon, Maksud crossed the knee-high barrier at the white tiger enclosure. Security guards had shouted warnings and other visitors had yelled at him to stop, but he pushed through the hedges anyway and dropped 18 feet into the dry moat below. Vijay, the 200-kilogram 7-year-old white Bengal tiger on the other side, noticed immediately and walked over to investigate this intrusion in his territory. For 15 minutes, the two of them stayed locked in position. Maksud pressed against the concrete wall with his hands raised in prayer, pleading. The tiger just stood there watching him, occasionally batting at him with his massive paw like he was testing unfamiliar prey. The crowd began throwing stones and sticks, screaming to distract Vijay. However, this was the wrong move. The commotion agitated him and triggered something primal. He lunged forward and clamped his jaws onto Maksud's neck. The force alone would have crushed his vertebrae, likely severing the spinal cord instantly. But Vijay wasn't finished. He dragged Maksud's body 50 meters across the enclosure, which is the way tigers naturally transport their kills. Witnesses described watching Maksud writhe for another 10 to 15 minutes while the tiger maintained its grip. Vijay would release briefly, then return to clamp down again on his neck. At some point during this process, Vijay began feeding. Parts of Maksud's skull were later found partially consumed. The zoo's emergency response exposed critical failures. There were no tranquilizer guns on site, as they were stored at the veterinary hospital, and no direct radio contact to coordinate a rescue. Guards instead focused on crowd control, while Maksud bled out in the enclosure. By the time the staff managed to frighten Vijay into his holding cage, Maksud had been dead for over an hour. His body remained in the enclosure for 2 more hours before retrieval. The autopsy confirmed death by cervical dislocation and hemorrhage from puncture wounds in his neck. Multiple bite marks covered Maksud's body, and the skull fragments showed evidence of crushing force and tissue removal. Tests suggested that Maksud had alcohol in his system, though his family disputed this. The zoo's director defended the facility's barriers, arguing that higher fences would obstruct viewing. The Central Zoo Authority investigation later concluded Maksud's death resulted from his own misadventure driven by an obsession for tigers. His pregnant wife Fatima filed for compensation, claiming negligence. The court sided with the zoo. Vijay was placed under observation but was never punished. Zoo officials noted he'd simply acted on instinct when confronted with prey in his space. The enclosure reopened within days, and business continued as normal. And the following year, attendance numbers actually increased. Vijay would remain at the zoo until August 2022, when he died at the age of 15 years old. We're staying in India for this next entry, and this time it's an animal that even a tiger probably wouldn't mess with. On June 20th, 2024, at the Kerala Farm Safari Centre in Kalar, India, M. Balakrishnan, a 62-year-old Mahout, was getting ready to take tourists on an elephant ride. The elephant he was working with that evening was Lakshmi, a 53-year-old Asian elephant. CCTV footage captured everything that happened next. Balakrishnan was trying to get Lakshmi to move into position. He had a long bamboo stick in his hand, which Mahout used to control elephants. In the video, he can be seen poking her leg with it. He needed her to move to a specific spot where tourists could climb onto the wooden platform on her back, but she wasn't cooperating. He poked her again with the stick, then again. Each jab was meant to make her obey and to force her into the position he wanted. Lakshmi had endured this treatment for decades. She'd been captured as a calf and spent her entire life giving rise to tourists, being prodded and beaten whenever she didn't immediately comply with commands. The security camera shows Balakrishnan continuing to jab at Lakshmi's legs. The tourists were already there, standing nearby. waiting for their safari experience. They'd paid money to ride an elephant through the jungle, and Balakrishnan needed to get Lakshmi ready. However, something changed in Lakshmi. After years of abuse, she'd had enough. In the video, you can actually see the exact moment she snaps. She suddenly rushes at Balakrishnan, moving faster than you'd expect from an animal that size and age, and he had no time to react. Lakshmi knocked him to the ground with her trunk. Balakrishnan fell hard onto his back. Before he could even try to get up, Lakshmi was on him. She placed her front foot on his lower body and pressed down. The weight of an elephant concentrated through one foot. His spine snapped immediately, but she didn't stop there. The CCTV showed her continuing to step on him, methodically crushing different parts of his body. Balakrishnan's body was being systematically destroyed under her weight. At one point, the force bent him completely in half, his upper body folding over at an impossible angle where his spine had broken. Lakshmi then used her trunk to grab Balakrishnan's head and rub it against the ground. She was grinding his face into the dirt while he was still conscious. Then she lifted her foot and brought it down on his head. The human skull can withstand about 520 pounds of force before it cracks. An elephant's foot delivers thousands of pounds of pressure. After crushing his skull, Lakshmi wrapped her trunk around Balakrishnan's neck and lifted his limp body off the ground. His body dangled in the air for a moment before she threw him back down. By this point, he was already dead, his body being mangled beyond recognition. The entire attack lasted less than 2 minutes. The tourists who'd been waiting for their elephant ride watched the whole thing happen. They'd come for an exotic experience. Instead, they watched a man get crushed to death right in front of them. Another Mahout rushed over and managed to calm Lakshmi down, but there was nothing anyone could do for Balakrishnan. His body underwent an autopsy before being released to his family for cremation. He was the 6th person killed by an elephant in Kerala in 2024 alone. The incident exposed what authorities already knew but had been ignoring. Kerala Farm was operating illegally. The safari centre didn't have a proper registration with the Animal Welfare Board of India, which is mandatory for any facility using animals as tourist attractions. Despite a Kerala High Court ban on elephant safaris in 2020, the park reopened after a few months and continued operating. After Balakrishnan's death, the Forest Department finally filed charges against the illegal safari centre. The park's owner was told to cease all operations. Under India's captive elephant management rules from 2003, elephants could only be used for religious parades with special permission. To use them for safaris required a license from the Animal Welfare Board. Kerala Farm didn't have one, but rules didn't specify any real penalties for operating without a license, so places like Kerala Farm kept running. Lakshmi had spent 53 years in captivity. She's still alive and still owned by the same people who ran the illegal safari. PETA India demanded she be sent to a sanctuary, away from anyone who would chain or beat her, though that hasn't happened. The owners are likely waiting for public attention to die down before putting her back to work. Over the past 15 years, captive elephants have killed 526 people in Kerala alone. Each death follows a similar pattern. An elephant endures years or decades of abuse until one day, something breaks. They kill their handler or a tourist or a bystander. Then everything goes back to normal until the next elephant snaps and kills someone else. Kerala Farm closed the next day, at least temporarily, but there are dozens of other illegal elephant safaris still operating across Kerala. The Mahouts working at those places watched the video of Balakrishnan's death. They know what Lakshmi did to him, but they still show up for work every day and abuse the elephants into getting into position for the next group of tourists, seemingly aware that one of them could be the next victim of an elephant who's had enough. On the morning of April 23, 2006, just outside Freetown, Sierra Leone, 5 men were heading to the Takogama Chimpanzee Sanctuary, arriving before the official opening hours. In the car were 3 American contractors working on the new US Embassy: Alan Robertson, Gary Brown, and Richie Goody. With them was Melvin Mama, a local friend Brown had made in Freetown, and their regular driver, Isa Kanu.
It's the largest chimp refuge in the world. Bruno is the alpha male. He's so big.
Yes, I'm from Texas. We grow prairie dogs bigger than any ape.
You'll be glad he's behind an electric fence.
Yeah.
The sanctuary housed about 90 chimpanzees, most rescued from the illegal pet trade after their parents were killed for bushmeat. 31 of them had just figured out how to escape their electric fence enclosure. The staff believed they'd been studying the locks. By the time the car with the 5 visitors arrived at the mountain road, the chimps were already loose. The first signs of trouble came when Bruno appeared. Bruno was 20 years old and weighed over 200 pounds. He'd been the sanctuary's first rescue back in 1989. He was named after the boxer Frank Bruno, and he'd grown into the undisputed alpha male. He was known for hurling rocks at visitors he didn't like. Now he was free, and a car full of strangers had just entered his territory. The chimps soon surrounded the car. Bruno slammed his fist through the windshield. They saw Bruno displaying his 2-inch fangs and screaming in pure rage. The other escaped chimps started circling the car. Canoe tried to reverse and accelerated toward the sanctuary gates. The car crashed into the iron bars and stalled, leaving them trapped. Bruno reached through the broken windshield and grabbed Canoe by the neck. He dragged him out onto the ground, where Canoe was dismembered. Bruno bit off his fingers one by one, then his toes. The chimp held him down and began eating his face, starting with the soft tissue. His nose, lips and cheeks were all torn away and consumed while he was still conscious. The other men scrambled out of the vehicle. Mama tried to help, but Bruno turned on him. He grabbed his hand and bit through it, taking 3 fingers clean off of the knuckles. Gary Brown watched his friend's hand turn into a mangled mess, with blood pumping from the stumps. Brown grabbed a thick tree branch. When Bruno charged him, Brown drove the end of it into his throat, then kept swinging until Bruno backed off. He could hear more chimps screaming from the surrounding forest. The Americans scattered into the jungle. Mama, bleeding heavily from his destroyed hand, refused to let Brown carry him. They could see Bruno watching them from the tree line, Canoe's blood still covering his face and hands. His body lay in pieces by the car. His entire face had been removed, and his skull was exposed where Bruno had peeled back the scalps to get to the brain tissue. It took nearly 2 hours for help to arrive. Police and sanctuary staff found Canoe's remains scattered across the entrance area. Parts of him were missing due to being consumed by Bruno. The Americans were treated for lacerations and shock, then flown to Atlanta for further treatment. Mama survived, but lost half his hand. Over the next 2 weeks, 21 of the escaped chimps returned to the sanctuary on their own. 6 more were captured, but Bruno and 3 others completely vanished. Armed police and soldiers hunted for them with orders to shoot on sight. They never found Bruno. Some claimed to spot him years later, living with wild chimps in the forest. The sanctuary's camera traps occasionally captured images of what might have been him, but nobody could be certain. What triggered the attack remains unclear. Some suggested the chimps saw the early morning visitors as intruders. Others pointed to Bruno's history of aggression towards strangers. The sanctuary director later said Bruno was just being what he was, a territorial wild animal in captivity who saw an opportunity. Issa Canoe left behind a family in Freetown. His death was officially attributed to negligence by unknown parties, though no charges were ever filed. The sanctuary reopened within days. They installed better locks, higher fences, and finally got tranquilizer guns on site. Bruno's image, ironically, now appears on Sierra Leone's passports after chimpanzees were declared the national animal in 2019. The same chimp who tore a man's face off and ate it somehow became a symbol of national pride. On March 3, 2005, St. James and LaDonna Davis had driven 2.5 hours to the Animal Haven Ranch, 30 miles east of Bakersfield, California. They were there to celebrate what they called their son's 39th birthday. Their son was a chimpanzee named Mo. They'd raised Mo since 1967, when St. James brought him back from Tanzania as an orphaned infant. For 30 years, Mo lived in their home, wearing clothes and using their toilet and sleeping in their bed. Then in 1999, after Mo bit off part of a woman's finger, animal control seized him. The Davises fought a bitter legal battle but lost. Mo ended up at Animal Haven Ranch, a private sanctuary in the San Bernardino foothills. That morning, the Davises arrived around 10, with Mo's birthday supplies. LaDonna set the cake on a table next to Mo's outdoor cage, while St. James got Mo's favorite chocolate drink. Through the bars, Mo clapped his hands when he saw them. In the adjoining steel cage lived 4 other chimps. 2 males named Buddy and Oliver, aged 16 and 13, and 2 older females named Susie and Bones. Somehow all 4 had gotten out of their enclosure. Virginia Brower, the sanctuary owner, found them in her house that morning and managed to detain the females, but the males were still free. LaDonna was cutting the birthday cake when she glimpsed movement to her left. Buddy was standing there free and watching her. She made eye contact. That single moment triggered everything that followed. Buddy charged and slammed into LaDonna's back and knocked her forward into her husband. Her arm went around St. James's neck and Buddy immediately bit down on her left hand. His jaws closed on her thumb and tore it clear off at the joint. St. James shoved his wife under the table. Both male chimps turned on him. Buddy went for his face while Ollie attacked his foot. St. James tried to protect his head with his hands. The chimps then proceeded to destroy them. Buddy grabbed each finger and bit through the joints and spit them out one by one. Within seconds, St. James had no fingers left on either hand, just bleeding stumps where they'd been torn away. Buddy then turned his attention to St. James's face. As they gripped his skull, his thumbs went into St. James's eye sockets. The right eyeball popped out completely and dangled by the optic nerve before Buddy yanked it free. Buddy's teeth sank into St. James's nose and ripped it off and exposed the nasal cavity. Then Buddy proceeded to rip off St. James's lips. Parts of both of his cheeks were torn off and the left jaw muscles were visible. Meanwhile, Ollie was destroying St. James's left foot. He chewed through the ankle bones and severed most of the foot. He moved up to the groin area and ripped off both of his testicles and ate them. Virginia Brower ran from her house screaming for her son-in-law Mark Carruthers to get his gun. Carruthers grabbed a .45 caliber revolver and ran toward the screaming. He found St. James being dragged along the ground by Buddy, who had him by what remained of his face, but the round had no effect. Buddy just kept mauling. Carruthers reloaded and knelt down close to Buddy's head and fired. The chimp fell off of St. James, but Ollie immediately took over and dragged St. James down a walkway by his mangled foot. Carruthers followed and shot Ollie in the head, finally ending the attack. When the paramedic arrived, he couldn't process what he was seeing. St. James looked like he'd been attacked by a grizzly bear. 8 of his fingers were gone. His right eye was missing with just an empty socket. He had no nose and lips. His testicles had been torn off, and his left foot was now barely attached. He also had massive tissue loss from his buttocks and torso. Somehow, St. James was still conscious and trying to speak through the hole where his mouth used to be. LaDonna crawled out from under the table, with her severed thumb bleeding profusely. She could see pieces of her husband scattered around the enclosure, fingers and flesh and parts of his face. The rest lay in the dirt. St. James was airlifted to the hospital. He stayed in a medically induced coma for months. Over the next 4 years, he underwent more than 60 reconstructive surgeries. They gave him a prosthetic eye and tried to rebuild his face, though it would never look human again. 2 slits marked where his nose had been. His mouth was a scarred hole, and he had lost all of his fingers and one of his feet. Investigators never determined exactly how the 4 chimps had escaped their enclosure. The Browers had been licensed since 1996 and had permits for 9 primates and had never had an incident. LaDonna said she still believed in the goodness of chimps. She visited Mo on Mother's Day that year and waved to him with her remaining fingers. In 2008, Mo escaped from his own cage at a different facility in San Bernardino. He was never found. St. James couldn't speak clearly through his destroyed face and would cry when talking about Mo. He said he never loved anything as much as he loved that chimp. The same species that left him mutilated and missing pieces of himself he'd never get back. He lived with his disfigurements until 2018, when he died from a cardiac arrest following a stroke. On August 14, 1997, Patty McConnell was driving with her 2 kids from Texas to Alaska when they stopped at Liard River Hot Springs Provincial Park in British Columbia. After 1,300 miles of driving on the road, the family needed a break, and the natural hot springs seemed perfect. They changed into swimsuits and headed barefoot down the wooden boardwalk toward the pools. The lower pool was crowded, so Patty and her 13-year-old son Kelly decided to check out the upper pool, while 7-year-old Kristen stayed behind to play with new friends. The 2 climbed the wooden steps to the hanging garden viewing platform. Kelly was pointing at tropical plants, when his mother noticed movement in the bushes. A large male black bear was sat there, chewing on a branch, staring directly at her. Kelly had his back turned. When his mother said a warning about the bear, he thought she was joking. Then he turned around. The bear was focused entirely on his mother. Kelly told her not to make any sudden movements, but the bear had already made up its mind. It snorted once, crashed through the railing, and charged. Patty ran. The bear caught her on the viewing platform. Kelly watched the animal engulf his mother's body with its own. The boy kicked the bear hard in the jaw. When that didn't work, he grabbed a stick and started beating it. The bear released Patty and turned on Kelly, hooking its claws into him and biting. It lifted the boy by his waist and threw him down. Ray Kitchen, a 56-year-old truck driver from Fort Nelson, was watching his 11-year-old daughter swim when he heard the screaming. He ran up the boardwalk and found the bear on top of Kelly, tearing into him while his mother lay bloodied nearby. Kitchen grabbed a tree branch and hammered it against the railing. yelling at the bear to get off. When that failed, he rammed a bigger branch into the bear's stomach. The bear rose from Kelly and charged Kitchen. The impact sent both of them crashing through the railing and tumbling into the bush below. Kitchen tried to protect himself by crawling to a tree and covering his head with his hands, while the bear clawed and bit him. Ingrid Bailey was soaking in the upper pool when she heard people yelling to run. She climbed out and saw the chaos below. While the bear was focused on Kitchen, Bailey and 2 other tourists, Frank Henningham and Brad Westervelt, grabbed a heavy log and used it as a battering ram, trying to drive the bear away from Kitchen. Bailey threw chunks of wood at the animal, screaming at it, but nothing worked. The bear adjusted its grip on Kitchen and clamped its jaws around his neck, throwing him into the air. When Kitchen hit the ground, his face was gouged open, his windpipe was ripped out, and his neck was nearly severed. He was already dead. The bear turned away from Kitchen's body and started moving through the park again. 28-year-old Ari van der Velden had been running from the upper pool when someone yelled that the bear was coming. He slipped on the wet boardwalk and fell into the bush. The bear was on him immediately, slashing with its claws and biting deep into his left thigh. Van der Velden kicked at the bear's nose and pulled its ears, but the animal kept attacking. By now, people were running to find weapons. David Webb, a businessman who just arrived at the park, was told about the attack and grabbed his shotgun from his truck. Wayne Egbroten also retrieved a rifle. They rushed toward the sounds of the attack. Back on the viewing platform, Bailey was trying to resuscitate Patty McConnell. Her son Kelly was moaning, bleeding heavily from his wounds. 71-year-old Frank Henningham stayed behind with them despite his exhaustion. The bear's paw appeared over the edge of the platform, centimeters from Kelly's feet. Henningham kicked the bear hard in the snout, finally driving it back. Egerbroten found the bear below the boardwalk with Van der Velden. Egerbroten aimed for the back of the bear's neck and fired. The bear dropped. He fired twice more to make sure. Patty McConnell died from her injuries. Ray Kitchen was dead at the scene. Kelly McConnell survived with severe wounds to his neck and body. Ari van der Velden survived despite being partially consumed. Both were airlifted to hospitals and eventually recovered. The bear turned out to be an adult male, emaciated and desperate. Park officials found no clear explanation for why it attacked with such persistence. Black bears rarely behave this way. They usually avoid humans altogether. 500 people attended Ray Kitchen's funeral in Fort Nelson. The Canadian government awarded him the Star of Courage. His daughter Jolene had lost her father while she was trying to save strangers. Kelly McConnell, Frank Henningham, Ingrid Bailey, and Brad Westervelt also received medals for bravery. Kelly was 13 years old when he fought a bear to save his mother's life. He couldn't save her, but he tried, and he survived. The attack lasted less than 20 minutes from start to finish. In that time, 2 people died, 2 were severely mauled, and multiple others risked their lives trying to help complete strangers. Roy Horn and Siegfried Fischbacher met in 1959 on the cruise ship T.S. Bremen, where Horn was working as a waiter and bellboy and Fischbacher was performing magic tricks. Horn challenged Fischbacher to pull a cheetah out of a hat instead of a rabbit, and was then asked to be in the show. The two were fired for smuggling a live cheetah onto the ship in a laundry bag. After performing together on European nightclub circuits with tigers, they were discovered in Paris and invited to perform in Las Vegas in 1967. Starting in 1990, they headlined a show at the Mirage. They were then signed to a $57.5 million 5-year contract. By 1999, their show had grossed $500 million, and they were the highest paid entertainers in Las Vegas. Across 50 years, Siegfried and Roy performed 30,000 shows to 50 million people. Horn was the primary animal trainer of the duo and had always had a deep bond with his animals. He expressed that many of the tigers were born in his lap, and until they reached 1 year old, he slept in beds with them and swam with them. On the night of his 59th birthday party, guests joked about his age and eventual retirement. Horn replied that he'd retire only when he couldn't do it anymore. Less than 24 hours later, on October 3, 2003, about 45 minutes into a show at the Mirage, Horn led out Manticore, a 7-year-old white tiger. In 30,000 tightly choreographed shows with elephants, lions, tigers, cheetahs, and sharp-beaked macaws, Siegfried and Roy had never suffered a serious mishap. The 380-pound tiger became distracted and veered off his routine, straying toward the edge of the stage. With no barrier protecting the audience, Horn jumped in between Manticore and the front row, just a few feet away. The tiger kept coming. Horn gave a command to lie down, but Manticore refused, gripping Horn's right wrist with his paw. Manticore then bit into Horn's sleeve. Horn lightly struck the tiger on the nose with the microphone, and Manticore eventually released him. However, as Horn retreated, the tiger leapt at him and knocked him down. Montecore then bit into his neck and dragged him off stage. The tiger sank his teeth into Horn's neck in front of a horrified audience of 1,500 spectators. A show employee pulled the tiger's tail, jumped on the animal, and grabbed it by the mouth to try to get it to release Horn. At the same time, another employee sprayed Montecore with a carbon dioxide canister. Horn was finally released after trainers discharged a fire extinguisher to distract Montecore. The tiger damaged an artery carrying oxygen to Horn's brain and crushed his windpipe. The stage was soaked in Horn's blood, and Montecore had sliced a vertebrae and severed an artery which cut off the blood to the right side of his brain. Horn suffered a stroke either during or after the attack. On the way to the trauma center, paramedics stopped Horn's massive blood loss and he was rushed into surgery. Before he lost consciousness, he told them that Montecore was a good cat and didn't want any harm to come to him. Early the next morning, Horn suffered another stroke and returned to surgery, where surgeons performed a decompressive craniectomy, removing about a quarter of his skull to relieve pressure on the brain. Horn had his spine severed, lost a large amount of blood, and had permanent impairment to his motor and verbal abilities. He suffered partial paralysis on his left side, and his windpipe was crushed. He was placed on a ventilator and was unable to swallow or speak. Before the news hit the papers, producer Kenneth Feld cancelled the 13-year-old show, telling more than 200 cast members to look for other work. The US Department of Agriculture investigated the attack, but was unable to reach a conclusion on what caused Montecore to turn on Horn. Roy Horn claimed that Montecore was actually trying to help him after the stroke by dragging him to safety. In 2020, animal handler Chris Lawrence told The Hollywood Reporter about his version of the events. He recalled that things started going awry almost immediately as Montecore wandered off from his mark, which led to Horn making an error. Lawrence said that instead of walking Montecore into a circle as usual, Horn just used his arm to steer him right back into his body in a pirouette motion. Horn spent many months in hospitals and clinics for rehabilitation, completing daily physical therapy, and had his property adjusted for disabilities. In February 2009, Siegfried and Roy staged a final appearance with Montecore at the Bellagio as a benefit for the Lou Rouveau Brain Institute. On April 23, 2010, they officially retired from show business, with Roy still suffering from his injuries. On March 19, 2014, Montecore died at the age of 17 after a brief illness. Roy Horn died on May 8, 2020, due to complications from COVID-19. Stephen Miller had been working at Predators in Action for years before he left to pursue other business ventures. The facility was owned by his cousin, Randy Miller, who trained wild and exotic animals for film and television. Although Stephen wasn't working as a trainer anymore, he was experienced with bears, having helped Randy raise and train a previous bear named Dakota. On April 22, 2008, Stephen came back to the facility in Big Bear, California, to help film a promotional video with a 5-year-old grizzly bear named Rocky. Rocky had been trained to wrestle humans and had recently appeared in the Will Ferrell movie Semi-Pro, which had been released just 7 weeks earlier. In the film, Rocky wrestled Randy Miller, who was acting as Will Ferrell's body double. The plan was to take some casual shots of Stephen and Rocky standing next to each other first, then begin a staged wrestling match. Randy explained that Rocky had been trained to become playful on cue. Stephen had bonded with the bear beforehand, talking to him and hanging out, and all the protocols had been followed. They were filming the advertisement when the bear started licking Stephen's face. During the initial shots, Rocky stood up in his trained wrestling posture and began the staged attack too early, catching Stephen off guard without his arm raised in the proper defensive position. Randy hit Rocky with a cane, trying to make him let go of Stephen. Randy later said this action might have unwittingly escalated the bear attack. The 7-foot-tall, 700-pound bear bit Stephen on the neck once, piercing his jugular vein and carotid artery. Randy said it happened so fast and that they did what they had to stop the bear. The team used bear spray and took only a matter of seconds to get Rocky away from Stephen. After being sprayed, the bear released Stephen, who managed to get up and walk away. A woman on the 911 call said he was bleeding heavily from his neck and that they needed someone there immediately. Stephen died before emergency help arrived. An autopsy revealed that he died within minutes of the attack. The autopsy also found that Stephen had multiple neck injuries consistent with a single bite. Randy Miller said that if the bite had hit Stephen's arm, it would have been bad, but wouldn't have cost him his life. According to one of Stephen's friends, in the weeks before the attack, the bear had been acting more aggressively and had busted the cages a couple of times. Following Stephen's death, the California Department of Fish and Game initiated a probe into the attack to decide whether or not Rocky would be euthanized. The coroner's office and the department ruled the death accidental and did not order the bear to be euthanized. However, Rocky was required to live under restrictions and was no longer able to have contact with persons other than his trainers and could no longer be exhibited or used for film or TV. Randy Miller said that he did not blame Rocky, noting that the kind of scenes he did put trainers in vulnerable positions. In the end, Stephen Miller didn't die because Rocky was angry with him. It was simply just a freak accident that unfortunately led to his death. Tyke was a female African bush elephant captured as a baby in Mozambique in 1973 and shipped to the United States, where she became the property of the Hawthorne Corporation, a company that supplied wild animals to circuses. By the time she reached adulthood, Tyke was chained up for 22 hours per day. Her former handler, Sally Joseph, admitted that she was, quote, an unhappy camper. Alan Campbell worked as an elephant trainer for the Hawthorne Corporation. Before that, he worked as an elephant keeper and trainer at the Baton Rouge Zoo, and later worked as an elephant consultant for several zoos, including the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. Campbell was described as a punishment-type trainer, with several complaints of abuse filed against him. He was said to work the elephants hard, including Tyke. On April 21, 1993, Tyke escaped through the front doors of the Atona, Pennsylvania Jaffa Shrine Center during a performance, remaining untethered for an hour. The rampage caused more than $14,000 in damage. Apparently, Tyke had become especially enraged and literally shook her handlers off and attempted to escape. Her trainer at the time, Tyrone Taylor, said after the incident that he knew then that she was a runner, fearing that the next outburst would be worse. That same year, on July 23rd, Tyke rampaged for 23 minutes at the North Dakota State Fair, injuring handler Michael Persley. Apparently, a handler by the name of John Cordell was observed beating her in public to the point where she was screaming and bending down on three legs to avoid being hit. Even when the handler walked by the elephant after this, Tyke screamed and veered away, demonstrating fear from his presence. After several performances on the mainland, the 21-year-old Tyke was shipped to Honolulu and ushered into the Neil S. Blaisdell Center for another show on August 20, 1994. When Tyke was led into the sold-out arena, she had lived in captivity for basically her entire life. Tyke began kicking her groomer, Dallas Beckwith, around like a rag doll. Some witnesses thought it was part of the show, but the crowd knew something was off when Tyke's trainer, Alan Campbell, stepped in. Tyke trampled and critically injured Beckwith, throwing him around numerous times. When Campbell tried to intervene to rescue Beckwith, that was when Tyke finally unleashed all of her pent-up rage and subsequently knocked him to the ground, dragged him, and then crushed him to death under the weight of her head and tusks. Campbell's autopsy revealed that he died from severe internal injuries, including major skull and chest fractures. The autopsy also revealed that Campbell had cocaine and alcohol in his system. After Campbell's death, Tyke then charged out of the arena and outside, injuring publicist Steve Hirano when he tried to stop her from escaping from the circus parking lot. A nearby police officer witnessed the rampage and fired multiple shots in the direction of Tyke, distracting her and causing her to flee away from Hirano. Tyke escaped into the streets of downtown Honolulu during the afternoon rush. She ran through the streets of Kakako for more than 30 minutes. Police fired 87 bullets into Tyke over the next hour. The police finally cornered Tyke and put her down with repeated gunshots. Riddled with bullets, Tyke finally collapsed, bled profusely, and died of blood loss from the gunshots. Tyke died of massive nerve damage and hemorrhaging of the brain. Lawsuits were filed against the city of Honolulu, the state of Hawaii, Circus International, Tyke's owner John Cuneo Jr., and Cuneo's company, the Hawthorne Corporation. Honolulu lawyer William Fenton Sink sued Cuneo on behalf of numerous plaintiffs, including young children who suffered psychological trauma after witnessing Tyke's death. The incident inspired legislation on local levels in Hawaii and abroad. In 2018, Hawaii became the second state to prohibit exotic animal performances. Tyke's body was examined, but ultimately discarded in a landfill, meaning that even in death, she couldn't escape the mistreatment that she had suffered her entire life.
Frodo was aggressive from a very small age. I mean, when he was about 3 years old, he started throwing rocks. If you dared to touch a rock, he would pick up a bigger rock and throw it again and again. Frodo was a real bully.
Frodo was born on June 30th, 1976 at Gombe National Park in Tanzania, right in the middle of what researchers call the Gombe Chimpanzee War. He was the second of 9 children to Fifi, who was the dominant female in the community. Being the son of the dominant female and the nephew of the then dominant male Figan, this meant that Frodo had quite a privileged upbringing and could even be considered something of a spoiled brat, and his behaviour towards others showed this. Jane Goodall named him Frodo after the character from Lord of the Rings, which she was reading to her son at the time. The irony of naming an aggressive chimpanzee after a hobbit wasn't lost on anyone who had come to know him. From the age of 3, Frodo was already throwing rocks. He wasn't just playing, he had aim, intention, and an unusual willingness to target humans. As an infant, he also disrupted Goodall's research by grabbing at her notebooks and binoculars. Where other chimps might lose interest, Frodo persisted. And even from that age, other chimps were afraid of him, with the youngsters always running away when he came over because they knew if they let him play with them, he'd only end up hurting them. Things only became worse when he became an adult, as he grew far bigger than any of the other chimps, eventually reaching 121 pounds of pure muscle and aggression. In adulthood, Frodo was no longer acting like a nuisance toward the researchers, he became an actual threat. He would charge at researchers and tourists, knock them down, and sometimes beat them. In 1988, he attacked Gary Larson, the Far Side cartoonist, during a visit to Gombe. The following year, he went after Jane Goodall herself, shaking her head violently enough that she nearly broke her neck. After that, she refused to enter his territory without bodyguards.
Frodo singled me out. None of us know why. But from very early on, he singled me out, and he didn't just push me over, he would come back and then stamp on me again, maybe 3 times in a row, and sometimes drag me. He's dragged other people. He stamped on other people. But he has a special expression on his face for me. We've all noticed, and we don't know why.
Frodo would also bully the other chimps. With his older brother Freud being the alpha male, this made Frodo his second in command by default, which obviously made him think that he had the authority to just push everyone else around. Freud, on the other hand, despite being much smaller, would always put Frodo back in his place whenever he stepped out of line. However, in October 1997, a mange epidemic spread through the group, and while Frodo remained healthy, Freud became sick and weak. Frodo took advantage of this and seized power. As the alpha male, Frodo didn't bother building relationships and respect from the rest of the group. While Freud was known to build relationships with the group by grooming them, Frodo instead ruled through intimidation and violence. He rarely groomed any of the other chimps, instead insisting that they groom him. On top of his violence towards other chimps, Frodo was also an incredibly skilled hunter. Between 1990 and 1995, he apparently killed 10% of all red colobus monkeys in the area, showing that he really was a force to be reckoned with. His violence towards humans also continued, with many researchers believing he would eventually kill someone, and that's exactly what would end up happening. On May 15, 2002, Rukia Siddiqui was walking through Gombe National Park with her 16-year-old niece and was carrying her 14-month-old daughter, Mayasa, on her back. They were taking a public footpath that ran through the park, a route they had taken many times before from their village to Lake Tanganyika. Rukia was married to one of the park attendants and had apparently known Frodo his entire life. At about 11:20 in the morning, roughly 3 kilometers from the research camp, they passed through the forest near the shore at Kahama. They crossed a small dry gully when they came upon Frodo just 4 meters from the path, feeding in one of the trees. At that distance, there was no time to run. Frodo leapt from the trees and snatched the baby. The 2 women were physically incapable of stopping a 121-pound chimpanzee.
I was overwhelmed by the sudden attack. The chimpanzee started unwrapping the cloth I'd tied my baby to my back with, and then ran off with my child.
Park wardens searched the area, and they found Frodo sitting in a tree. When they approached, he ran. What he left behind was Mayasa's badly mutilated corpse. She'd been beaten to death and partially eaten. The killing generated international attention and calls for Frodo to be euthanized. Shadrach Kamenya, Gombe National Park's director of chimp research, stated that Frodo's behavior during that incident seemed to be more of the natural hunting behavior of chimpanzees, saying that they seem to view human babies just as they view the young of other species, such as colobus monkeys and baboons, as potential prey.
Frodo killed a human infant, something which we'd been predicting would happen for a very, very long time, because chimpanzees are hunters. And although at Gombe their favourite prey is monkey infants, human beings are just one other kind of primate.
Frodo wasn't euthanized, but later in 2002, he fell gravely ill with mange himself. And unfortunately for him, just like when he deposed Freud when he was sick, a group of the other males in the community decided to take the opportunity to depose him. He was brutally beaten by a coalition of males led by another chimpanzee named Sheldon, and spent the next 2 years traveling away from the rest of the community. He received antibiotics from researchers, which likely saved his life. When he rejoined the group in 2004, he was almost completely unrecognizable. His illness had completely taken away all of his muscle, and he was now very thin and frail looking. When he rejoined the group, he was basically shoved right to the bottom of the totem pole, and stayed as a low-ranking male for the rest of his life. Though this did cause him to mellow out considerably, and he rarely showed aggression towards people anymore. He died on November 10, 2013, at age 37, from an infection in his groin after being bitten by a dog at the research station. Frodo fathered 8 children in his time, with 6 different females. The only chimp he'd really seemed to stay close with throughout his life was his mother, Fifi, and it turns out the 2 of them were actually too close, because Frodo actually fathered one of Fifi's 9 children, a male named Fred, who died in 1997 at age just 1 year old during the mange epidemic. In his life, Frodo killed more monkeys, attacked more humans, and dominated more thoroughly than almost all of his peers. His attack on Mayasa wasn't a momentary thing. It was consistent with his lifetime of escalating aggression that began when he was only 3 years old, and only ended when disease and age finally caught up with him. Travis was born on October 21, 1995, at a compound near Festus, Missouri. His mother was Susie, a former zoo chimp. At 3 days old, he was taken from her and sold to Sandra and Jerome Herald for $50,000. The Heralds named him Travis after Sandra's favorite singer, Travis Tritt. They raised him at their home in Stamford, Connecticut. Travis accompanied them everywhere. He became a local celebrity. Police officers knew him and would stop to take pictures with him. Travis learned to open doors with keys, dress himself, water plants, feed hay to the Herald's horses, and eat at the table with the family. He drank wine from a stem glass and loved ice cream so much that he memorized the schedules of the passing ice cream trucks. He used a computer to look at pictures, watched television with a remote control, and brushed his teeth with a water pick. He had even driven a car on several occasions. As a juvenile, he appeared in several television commercials, including spots for Pepsi and Old Navy. He also apparently appeared on The Maury Povich Show and The Man Show.
Thank you. You're welcome. Despite being wonderful companions over the past semester, I'm sorry to report that my subject group scored below average in all responses. They showed poor communication skills, no understanding of tools and their uses, a complete lack of organization, and no decision-making abilities. In conclusion, if I can't find some extraordinary missing link that will unlock the barrier between us, this project will be canceled. Thank you. You're welcome.
In September 2000, the Herald's only daughter, Suzanne, died when her car collided with a tree along Virginia Highway. Jerome died of cancer in April 2004. After Jerome's death, Travis became detached and somber, rocking back and forth for hours. Sandra had to remove all photos of Jerome from the house because they upset Travis. But Travis had already shown signs that something was wrong. On October 19, 2003, someone threw an empty soda bottle through a partially open car window, striking Travis while they were stopped at a red light. Travis unbuckled his seatbelt, opened the door, and chased the man. They lured him into the car several times, but Travis kept letting himself out of another door and occasionally chased officers around the car. The incident led Connecticut to pass a new law prohibiting people from keeping primates over 50 pounds as pets and requiring owners of exotic pets to apply for permits. The Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection didn't enforce the law on the Herald because they had owned Travis for so long and didn't believe he posed a public safety threat. A state biologist, Elaine Hinch, sent a memo in October 2008 stating that Travis was, quote, an accident waiting to happen, but nothing was done. By 2009, Travis weighed 200 pounds, which was considered morbidly obese for a chimp. The family had stopped bringing him out in public. He stayed in the house where he didn't get any exercise. Instead, he watched television, ate junk food, and played on his PC. Charlotte Nash had been friends with Sandra Herold for decades. In the 1970s, they had met to become friends. Nash and her daughter had struggled financially in a homeless shelter for more than a year at one point. Nash scraped by on odd jobs, yard work, and cleaning horse stalls. Herold offered Nash a rent-free loft apartment that belonged to her late daughter. She also gave Nash a job handling towing dispatch and bookkeeping. On February 16, 2009, Sandra Herold and Charlotte Nash went to Morgan Sun Casino in Connecticut. Herold took Nash to the salon beforehand. When they returned, Travis was highly agitated. While Sandra was cleaning his room, he took her car keys from the kitchen counter, unlocked the door, and went outside. He showed no interest in things he typically enjoyed. Concerned, Herold put a Xanax in his afternoon tea. At around 3:40 p.m., Travis let himself out of the house again. Sandra called Charlotte and asked for her help getting him back. When Charlotte arrived and got out of her car, Travis attacked her. Nash had changed her hairstyle since Travis had last seen her, which may have confused and alarmed him. She was also holding a Tickle Me Elmo doll, one of his favorite toys. Travis tore off her nose, ears, and hands and blinded her. Sandra tried to stop the attack by hitting him with a shovel, then stabbing him in the back with a butcher knife. She later recalled, quote, "For me to do something like that, put a knife in him, was like putting one in myself." She said Travis turned around as if to say, "Mom, what did you do?" Herold called 911. Police initially believed the call was a hoax, until Sandra started screaming, "He's eating her."
Stand for 911, where's your emergency?
This is Sandy. 231 Rock Rimmon Road.
What's the
Send
problem?
the police. Send the police.
What's the problem there?
The chimp killed my friend.
What's the problem with your friend?
Oh, please.
What's the problem with your friend? I need to know.
Send the police up with a gun. With a gun. Hurry
Who
up.
has a gun?
Please hurry up. He's killing my girlfriend.
What is the problem?
He's killing my friend.
Who's killing your friend?
My chimpanzee.
Oh, your chimpanzee is killing your friend.
Yes. He ripped her apart. Hurry up.
With a gun.
Hurry up, please.
There's someone on the way.
With guns, please. Shoot him.
What is the monkey doing? Tell me what the monkey's...
He ripped her face off.
He ripped her face off?
He's trying to attack me. Please,
Okay,
hurry.
I need you to calm down a little bit. They're on the way. Can you put yourself away? I don't want the monkey attacking you.
Please, hurry up. Listen to me.
They're on the way, ma'am.
Guns. They gotta shoot him, please. Please, hurry.
Are you there with your friend? I need you to help your friend. Can you go help your friend?
I can't. He tried to attack me now.
Is he still there with your friend?
Yes.
Okay, so then back off. Then don't get any closer, okay? They're already on the way.
Please.
If the monkey moves away from your friend, let me know, okay? So we could try to help your friend.
No, I can't. She's dead. She's dead.
Why are you saying that she's dead?
She's dead. He ripped her apart.
He ripped what apart? Her face?
Everything.
He ripped her apart?
Listen, I think I'm gonna faint. I think I'm gonna pass out.
No, just breathe, okay? I'm gonna stay with you on the phone until they get there.
Listen to me. Please hurry. Please hurry.
Police officers responded at 3:46 p.m. When Travis attempted to enter the driver's side door, the officer shot him 4 times. Travis staggered backward, screeched, and ran off. He returned to the house, entered his enclosure, and died. Huge chunks of scalp and fingers lay scattered around the yard. With the stump of what remained of her arm, Charlotte Nash reached for the officer's leg. Paramedics described Nash's injuries as horrendous. Travis had bitten or tore away her eyelids, nose, jaw, lips, and most of her scalp. He'd broken nearly all of the bones of her facial structure, and he'd fully removed one of her hands and almost all of the other. Within 72 hours, she underwent more than 7 hours of surgery on her face and hands by 4 teams of surgeons. The hospital provided counseling to staff members who initially treated her because of the extraordinary nature of the wounds. Doctors removed some of Travis's hair and teeth that were embedded in her bones and reattached her jaw. They announced on April 7, 2009, that she would be blind for life due to her eyes becoming infected in the attack. After initial treatment, she was transferred to the Cleveland Clinic. on May 28, 2011, Charlotte Nash underwent transplant surgery, receiving a donated face and hands. The hand transplant was initially successful, but when she developed pneumonia shortly after, doctors were forced to remove them 5 days after the transplant due to infection and resulting poor circulation. She remains blind and without hands. An autopsy performed on Travis did not disclose any disease process that would explain the attack. Xanax was detected in his system. Xanax is a potent anti-anxiety drug that can cause disorientation, reactions of hallucination, aggression, rage, and mania in humans. Travis had not previously exhibited violent behavior, especially towards Nash, with whom he interacted regularly. Travis was cremated. When Sandra Herold died on May 24, 2010, his ashes were interred in the casket with her. Her attorney said that she had suffered a series of heartbreaking losses over the last several years, beginning with the death of her first and only daughter, who was killed in a car accident, then her husband, then her beloved chimp, as well as the tragic maiming of her friend and employee, Charlotte Nash. In the end, her heart, which had been broken so many times before, could take no more. In March 2009, Nash's family filed a $50 million lawsuit against Sandra Herold. Nash received approximately $4 million from Herold's estate. She also attempted to sue the state of Connecticut for $150 million, arguing officials knew Travis was dangerous but did nothing. The lawsuit failed. Travis may have grown up seeing the Herolds as his family, but in the end, he was still a dangerous wild animal, and it really should be common sense that keeping something as dangerous as a chimpanzee as a pet is a truly insane thing to do, because there's always that risk that they could snap and turn on you at any moment. And that's the end of the video, folks. It was interesting for me to revisit these cases, especially Frodo's, because I've known about him for well over 20 years because he was in a ton of documentaries throughout his life. One thing I didn't know about until recently though is that he had a baby with his own mother. Evidently he and Fifi wanted to keep it in the family. There's also something wild that I learned about Travis while I was making this video. A guy calling himself Greg once called into a radio show and wanted to express how fascinated he was with Travis's story. That guy's name wasn't Greg. He was someone I've talked about before, and I can't believe he's showing up on this channel again. I'll be playing the whole audio once I'm done here, so that's why it says there's still around 7 minutes left. Stick around if you want to hear it. I'd like to thank all my patrons, especially those whose names you're seeing on the screen now, particularly John Blood Smells Like Duty, Helen Korn, Kyle, BAN, Brendan O'Connell, Adam Clayton, Count Nagula, Danny Jade, Paul Mendoza, Squishy, Alex Christmas, Bella Schwartz, Brody Millers, Belsey Gell, Stimulate, Inquisitor Zarius, and Dick the Cock Johnson and the Woodmaster at WrestleMania X69 or Maybe Not Dude. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.
Hello. We got the collapsible headphones here, but we're back.
Sorry, we got Greg on the phone.
Oh, Greg. Okay. How's it going?
Hi, good. I'm a fan of your writing.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to bring up such an old news story, but I couldn't find anything that you said about the topic, and it seems relevant to your interests, so I thought I would bring up Travis the chimp. Do you remember him?
I don't.
Well, he was a highly domesticated chimpanzee who lived in a suburban home in Stamford, Connecticut.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
And he was raised just like a human child, starting from the week he was born. By the time that he was 14 years old, which would be somewhere around age 20 in human years, he slept in a bed, he took his own baths, he dressed himself, he brushed his teeth with an electric toothbrush.
Really? When was this?
Well, this happened in early 2009.
Oh.
He ate his meals at a table and enjoyed human foods like ice cream. And he used a remote control to watch television and liked baseball games. And he even used a computer to look at pictures on the internet. And it goes without saying that Travis was very overweight. He was 200 pounds when he should have been around the low hundreds. And he was actually taking Xanax.
Amazing.
I couldn't find any information about why he was taking it, but it just seems to say a lot that he was giving it at all. And basically, I think Travis wasn't really any different than a mentally handicapped human child. But anyway, one day in February 2009, he was acting very agitated, and at some point grabbed his owner's car keys, went outside and started beeping from car to car, apparently wanting to go for a car ride. And he was acting very aggressively, so his owner called her friend over to get her to help him to calm down and go back inside. And once she arrived, he immediately attacked her, and his owner tried to stop him, but couldn't, and she even resorted to stabbing him with a knife, but nothing worked. And she said that after she stabbed him, he looked at her as if to say, "Why'd you do that to me, Mom?" Because apparently that was what their relationship was like, no different than between a human mother and a human child. So after the stabbing, she called the police, who arrived 12 minutes after the attack, at which point her friend was pretty close to dead. And once the cruiser came up, Travis went over to it, tried to open the locked passenger door. He smashed off the side view mirror, went over to the driver's door, opened it, and the cop shot him. He fled back into the house, where he went to his playroom and bled to death. And this might not seem very relevant, but I'm bringing it up because afterward, everyone was condemning his owner for saying how irresponsible she was for raising a chimp like it was a child, and that she should have known something like this would happen because chimps aren't supposed to be living in civilization. They're supposed to be living in the wild among each other. But their criticism stops there, and the implication is that there's no way anything could have gone wrong in his life if he had been living in civilization as a human rather than a chimp.
Indeed.
I'm so interested in Travis because he brings up questions about this whole process of child raising. Isn't something which just happens to gently exist without us having to do anything, because every newborn child, human child, is born in a chimp-like state, and civilization is only sustained by conditioning them for years on end so that they'll accept it for what it is. And since we've gone through this conditioning, we can observe a human family raising a human child, and I'm sure that even you have trouble intuitively seeing it as something unnatural. But when we see a chimp in that position, we viscerally know that there's something profoundly wrong with the situation. And it's easy to say there's something wrong with it simply because it's a chimp, but what's the real difference between us and our closest relatives? Travis wasn't an untamed monster at all. He wasn't just feigning domestication, he was civilized. He was able to integrate into society. He was a chimp actor when he was younger, and his owner drove him around the city frequently in association with her towing business, where he met many different people and got along with everyone. If Travis had been some nasty monster all his life, it would have been widely reported, but to the contrary, it seems like everyone who knew him said how shocked they were that Travis had been so savage, because they knew him as a sweet child. And there were 2 isolated incidents early in his life when he acted aggressively, but summarizing them would take too long, so basically I'll just say that he didn't act really any differently than a human child would, and the people who would use that as an indictment against having chimps live as humans do wouldn't apply the same thing to humans, so it's just kind of irrelevant. But anyway, look what civilization did to him. It had the same exact effect on him as it has on humans. He was profoundly sick in every sense of the term, and he had to resort to these surrogate activities like watching baseball and looking at pictures on a computer screen and taking Xanax. He was a complete mess. And his attack wasn't simply because he was a senselessly violent, impulsive chimp, which was how his behavior was universally portrayed. Immediately before his attack, he had desperately been wanting his owner to drive him somewhere. And the best reason I can think of for why he would want that, looking at his entire life, would be that some little thing he experienced was the last straw, and he was overwhelmed by the life that he had, and he wanted to get out of it by changing his environment, and the best way that he knew how to deal with that was by getting his owner to drive him somewhere else. And when his owner's friend arrived, he knew that she was trying to coax him back into his life of domestication, and he couldn't handle that, so he attacked her and anyone else who approached him. And dismissing his attack as simply being the senseless, violent impulsiveness of a chimp instead of a human is wishful thinking at best. His attack can be seen entirely parallel to the attacks, random acts of violence that you bring up on your show every week, committed by humans, which the mainstream also has no explanation for. And if he's an actual human, I just don't think it would be such a stretch to say that he very well could have been a teenage mall shooter or something like that. And
wow. Thank you, Greg. That's quite a story. That's really apropos, isn't it? Travis the chimp.
It's just that I'm a little surprised that I never heard you bring it up at all, because Maybe I'm just seeing connections where there aren't any, but...
Not, I think not. No, I didn't catch that one. I didn't, maybe I was out of the country or something, I don't know, but I missed it. Thanks very much, man.
Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care. Wow, very well articulated, I think.